Welcome. This year's Bridge seminar, organized by the Japan Society Promotion of Science Alumni Club Denmark, was held on 26th of September to celebrate the Bridge Fellowship Program, where a regular member of JSPS ACD, so as JSPS alumni, can return to Japan to visit their previous host. This is something that we initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic and then continued after the pandemic. The webinar we held now in 2024 was to celebrate the Bridge Fellowship of 2023, where Dr. Molly Brooks from DTU visited a number of groups, including the group of Professor Yoshiki Matsushita at Nagasaki University. Professor Matsushita gave a talk that was not recorded due to the fact that it's new research that is not yet published, but this was followed by a talk by Dr. Molly Brooks about her experience as a Bridge Fellow, which we hope can be of an inspiration to everybody wanting to apply for a Bridge Fellowship in the future.
Thank you very much, Professor Matsushita, for coming and giving us the talk. That was very nice. I'm going to talk about my Bridge Fellowship experience. I work at the National Institute of Aquatic Resources. I'm a senior researcher at the Danish Technical University. So in 2008, during my PhD, I studied some game theory work by Professor Yoi Wasa. And then shortly after that, I heard about the JSPS summer fellowship program that's offered through the US National Science Foundation and JSPS. And so I applied for that to go and work with Yoi Wasa. And I did a chapter of my PhD while I was there. I spent 2 months at Kyushu University, and it was very productive. So then 10 years later, the Alumni Club of Denmark had a meeting at DTU, and I joined the board in March that year, 2019. And then just 1 month later, I was lucky enough to attend the FTFB meeting in Shanghai, where I met Professor Matsushita. And FTFB is the Fisheries Technology Research Group that's very international. And I was there presenting some open source software that can be used for analyzing fishing gear technology experiments. And so then in June 2020, during the pandemic, one of his students asked a question about my software. The software is called Selfisher, and the student wrote to the users list and asked a question and expressed some interest in that. And I had heard about the Bridge Fellowship, and so I started connecting the dots that maybe I could use the Bridge Fellowship to go to Japan and talk about this software if more people were interested in it. And so I applied after the pandemic in 2022, and I was lucky to get it. And so I got to go to Japan again. And at this point, it had been 10 years since I'd visited Japan. But I planned a big itinerary for this 2023 Bridge Fellowship. I first visited Yokohama for 3 days at the Japan Fisheries Research and Education Agency. That's where they set the fishing allowable catches for many of the fisheries in Japan. So it's a research institute, not a university. And then I spent 2 days in Tokyo at the university at Professor Matsushita's alma mater, and then Kagoshima University. But on the map, basically, if you look at the map, I spent a week in the Tokyo-Yokohama area, and then a week between Nagasaki and Kagoshima. And then I went to Kyushu University, my alma mater, and then down to Okinawa. And so I was doing 2 research places per week with the weekends as a break. And I'll tell you some of the details here. So in Yokohama, my host was Dr. Nishijima. And I first gave a half day of GLIM TMB lessons. That's one of my software packages that's used in fisheries. And then my host organized a full day seminar with 6 different speakers, and that was really interesting. And then we had a visit to an aquarium where I took a photo of this fish. Then at Tokyo University, my host was Professor Tadashi Tokai, and he had previously written some Excel files that did the same analyses as my software does, and they were one of the only open source ways of analyzing this data that we work on. And so we had a fun time with a master's student comparing the answers you get from the Excel files to the answers you get from my R package, and they match up pretty well, but the R package has the advantage that you get confidence intervals, and so that's nice. And he took me on the visits to the campus fisheries museum and to the Tokyo fish market. And I used to study Japanese art as an extracurricular activity, and so I was interested to see this painting of the origin of the fish market in Tokyo. Okay, so then Professor Anraku, he was my host at Nagasaki University, at Kagoshima University. And there I gave a talk titled Simulating How Changing Selectivity Changes the Future. And we visited this research vessel on a beautiful sunny day. And I thought it was pretty cool to see this equipment on the research vessel where they observed the environmental conditions at the depth of the sea. So in this computer screen, you can see depth and how the temperature changes with depth. And this is the type of environmental data that I use in my analyses quite often in species distribution models, but I've never seen how it was collected before. So that was kind of cool. And we did an eel survey. That was really exciting. I've never done this before. Eels have an interesting life cycle where the adults come to rivers, and then the spawning and the juvenile stage happens out at sea. And so here in this middle photo, you can see an experimental eel habitat. Each of these dark squares in the river is a habitat for the adult eels. And they take them out and survey them periodically. And so I got to help sort out these little tiny animals that are not the eels, like the crabs and the other random animals, fish and stuff like that. And each eel that they found, they checked it to see if it had a tag in it, like a chip that you would put in your pet. And if it didn't already have a tag in it, then they would tag it and put it back. And so they're surveying them to monitor their population. And the eels in Japan are doing much better than the ones in Europe. And I'm not sure why, but there's a lot of great science going on to study that. And this image on the left is from a poster I saw in the university. So then my host, Professor Matsushita at Nagasaki University, is the one you just heard from. And there I gave a seminar talk, and we visited this research vessel. And I got to speak to scientists and students while I was there, which was great. At each university, I was speaking to different scientists and students. That was useful for me and hopefully for them. And then I visited Professor Emeritus Yoi Wasa. He was my original host back in 2009. And I gave a seminar talk on growth modeling. And I visited the Fukuoka fish market where I saw some cool taxidermied fish. So then in Okinawa, OIST, they call it, my host was Assistant Professor Dave Armitage. And by that time, I was too tired for activities other than giving the seminar talk and swimming in the sea. My seminar talk was titled Forecasting Fish Growth to Prepare for Climate Change Scenarios. And Yeah, I think that I was a bit tired by the end because I'd done so many activities. And I think that visiting 6 research centers in 3 weeks was maybe too much, but really I had such a great time at each location that I wouldn't have cut any of them out. I wish I could have just spent more time at each location and done more research. And so I guess if I was going to do it again, I would visit fewer and spend more time at each place. And yeah, I would try to not stay in hotels because that was sort of tiring. Professor Matsushita was very nice and put me in the university's guest house. That was a comfortable place to stay with a quiet garden and beautiful architecture. And so I really enjoyed that place to stay. And yeah, I would do things differently a little bit, but I enjoyed all of it, so I wouldn't cancel any of it. It's hard to say. Yep. So that's the end of my talk.
Thank you so much, Molly, for sharing it. It really does seem like a bit of a marathon that you had, but I'm sure you and your hosts all got a lot of useful contact out of it. I guess you also talked with a lot of students and younger members of the groups, right? So
Yeah.
that's also very much part what Bridge Fellowship wants to promote, a lot more contact. You certainly have done so.